Jackson Jr. touchdown. Marvelous Mark.
Ball next to the end zone, dropped down for Franklin. Oh, majestic touchdown.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast.
Welcome to Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football show. If things look and sound a little different here today, that's because they are. The host of Chasing the Natty, Jared Palmgren, is out today. He's fine. He's just taking care of some priorities. He needed the CFF team over at Campus to Canton to step up in his absence, and step up we have. Today's show will be hosted by me, Nate Marchese. Also with us today is another CFF team member and jack of all trades at C2C, Chris Moxley. So today's show will cover some spring campus news at the beginning, and then we'll take a look at some bounce back candidates. All of this March Madness that I've been watching has got me thinking about rebounding, I guess. So later we'll discuss some of those players that we think are in line for a potential rebound season. So everybody probably going to have to bear with me at times here from a technical standpoint, because I am definitely not a tech savvy guy here. Chris, do you consider yourself somebody that's fairly tech savvy?
Not when it comes to this sort of thing. I
Okay.
mean, I've been on a show. I was on a show with Jared all last season. I did none of the technical work. So
that's exactly how it is for me. You don't realize kind of what some of the things are that goes on behind the scenes with Jared until you try to take over for it. And you're like, oh man, this guy does a lot with like graphics and setting things up and stuff like that. So it's going to be a skeleton set as far as graphics today, but we're going to try to make it work. First things first here, let's go over a couple things that I'm sure Jared would like for me to take care of. And that is just his spiel here as far as the CFF team. I think most of you guys are probably familiar with us, but if you're not, the CFF team here over at Campus Canton is Jared Palmgren, myself, Nate Marchese, Brandon Sanders, and of course, Chris Moxley. We've got a number of other people here that help out as well. And we take care of some podcasts, articles, rankings. ADP is going to be up on the site, everything like that. So lots of stuff to check out over there. Obviously, if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe the podcast, the YouTube page. Try to do everything you can to follow us here. 5-star reviews are obviously important, so please do that. I know Jared's got a goal of hitting 1,000 subscribers. Be sure to check him out. He is at CFF Jared. At CFF_Jared. And then the Chasing the Natty podcast is at Chasing the Natty. So be sure to check that out there. Chris, do you want to give your Twitter handle while we're at it?
Yeah, you can find me and everything I do at Chris Moxley 19 on Twitter. It's an amalgamation of CFF, C2C, Devi content, just anything college football related. A lot of focus on during the season, like betting stuff, which I dive into a lot heavier. But now is kind of the chill period of the off season, which is great.
It is, yeah, and that's why I call you the jack of all trades, because it does seem like you kind of dabble in everything over there at C2C. So your content's great. Yeah, it is. It is a little bit of a slower period, but with the spring practices really are kind of fully underway right now. We're starting to get more and more practice reports. There really isn't very many teams left to kick off spring anymore. Let's see here. I believe it looks like Marshall is going to be kicking off this week, as well as Connecticut, Maryland, UMass, and Akron. So, and that's pretty much it. On Saturday, April 1st, not an April Fool's joke here, we actually have Michigan and Southern Miss spring scrimmages. So their spring games are going on. We got a couple, at least one Power 5 program, and we've had a few spring games also go on so far. So we're kind of getting into the thick of things as far as spring practices. Have you been keeping up with much of the spring practice reports. I know Matt does a fantastic job on YouTube posting some of those.
Yeah, I watch what Matt puts out there, and that's really, really helpful stuff. If you're not checking out the Cam Scan YouTube page, I mean, possibly the most valuable information that we're putting out there currently, just keeping you up to speed and making sure that you're well aware when you're in these drafts, best balls, whatever, that you do have access to current information, because a lot of things are changing very quickly. And we, like you said earlier, we've had teams that are like done and have been done with spring for a while. So we know some of those changes that have already happened. Just make sure you're following those. Those are really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and dive into some of that, some of the spring news that we have here. The first one that I want to touch on is what we're kind of finding out about at Ole Miss there in the Grove. So we've got some information as far as what the QB situation is and how that is playing out. And so far it has been Jackson Dart pretty much taking all of the reps as QB1. And then we have seen Howard as well as Spencer Sanders kind of step in this 2A, 2B. They're kind of splitting with the twos. It sounds like maybe Spencer Sanders isn't fully healthy, kind of still recovering from the shoulder issue that he had last year. But word is that Howard is looking really good. His arm talent really stands out in that QB room, and that it's maybe a situation where we're not going to be able to count him out of the mix. Maybe this is a three-headed QB race. Do you buy into that, Chris? Do you think he's got any shot in actually making some run here?
I find it hard to believe. I mean, he was a highly regarded recruit, right? He wasn't quite a five-star, but he was darn close.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I liked what I saw from Jackson Dart at times, and I think that he's the most potential probably of any quarterback in that room, just based on like his raw skill set. I think is probably the best. But he was just so up and down last year that I could see at some point Howard stepping in or Sanders stepping in if either of them struggles at some point and you want a veteran back there. But it doesn't really surprise me that Dart's the one.
Yeah, sometimes it's really hard to decipher. Okay, what is just puff piece work that these coaches are doing to try to prevent somebody from transferring? When you got 3 QBs in that room, you're trying to divide up the reps. You got to tell the reporters something. Otherwise, if one person is clearly the guy and just going to get all the reps, then it's hard to keep everybody there. But Dart looks improved, but that's he's got the leg up because this is his second year in that system there with Lane Kiffin. Another just kind of a little interesting tidbit is that Chris Marshall is actually running with the threes. That's the wide receiver that is a transfer from Texas A&M, also a highly recruited guy. He was another borderline 5-star wide receiver. But yeah, he is transferred in and he's currently running with the threes. It's super early. Does that concern you at all if you have Chris Marshall shares?
I mean, it has to a little bit, right? Like it's early.
Right.
But this was a dude who, I believe he was a 5-star.
Yeah.
I believe he was a 5-star, but yeah, he's on the borderline right there. He got kicked off. Well, he didn't get kicked off technically, the team, but I mean, he had an incident where they were smoking weed in South Carolina's locker room, and basically got suspended, and then I think the relationship just dissolved where he left the program. I don't know if that's like who he is as a player or that's just like a mistake that he made, but it always concerns me when something happens to a player that's really good. And he was on the field last year too, which was a lot for Jimbo getting a freshman out there.
Right.
I think you have to be concerned, but I'm not like to the point where I'm actively trying to shop him, I guess.
The other 3 wide receivers that were running with the ones was Jaden Knox, JJ Henry, and Dayton Wade. That was the one. Sounds like Dayton Wade was actually looking pretty good throughout the first couple of practices there. Prescorn, the transfer from Memphis, actually running as tight end 1. I couldn't read any further to see if there was any situation there with the what's the other tight end starter that was there
Trigg.
last year? Michael Trigg. So I don't know if maybe he's dinged up and they're just holding him out, or if he's actually been overtaken already by Prescorn. But it is Prescorn right now that is running with the ones.
He's a good player. Just in
he,
general. I mean, I thought he was excellent last year.
Yeah. All reports are that he looks pretty good there already at Ole Miss, that he's kind of making some waves. So would not surprise me. They're going to have to go a lot of 12 personnel in order for both of those guys to be fantasy relevant, but it's not something that's totally out of the question for Lane Kiffin and his offenses. He's been able to, and even though Trigg was the tight end one there last year, they still ran a lot of 2 tight end sets. So I don't think that's a foreign concept for them. Let's move it over to Lubbock, Texas, and let's talk about Texas Tech and a early guy that's kind of making some waves here is Austin P, wide receiver transfer, Dre McCray. Word out of camp over there from both offensive coordinator Zach Kittley and defensive coordinator Tim DeRuyter is that he has been absolutely incredible with the amount of speed, just totally wowing everybody with how fast he is. And he has actually been compared to former Texas Tech great wide receiver Jakeem Grant. So kind of an interesting comparison there. What are your thoughts on McCray, and how do you see that kind of that slot role playing out there between him, Xavier White, and then we've also got the other guy that was, gosh, his name is slipping me right now too.
Price.
Miles Price, yeah, who is also somebody that we liked quite a bit last year. Yeah. What do you see there?
So I have been in a handful of drafts this offseason, and McCray goes a little bit earlier than I think I'm comfortable with. It's usually Nick who's taking him, by the way.
Nick Allen's big Dre McCray guy.
I think Mike Bainbridge is too, if I remember correctly. But okay. Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I actually really like Dre McCray, and he's the guy that I would draft first. I just think there was so much rotation last year in that room,
right?
Not a lot of guys leave either, and so it's just a really crowded wide receiver room. I like him; he'd be my preferred target. I happened to catch him playing last year in their first game against Western Kentucky, and I was like, "Who the heck is this dude?"
Right.
Like he jumped out immediately.
And he looks solid against Alabama last year too. They played Alabama.
Yeah, he did.
He looked nice.
So I'm excited. I just don't know how you can take him in the top like 7 rounds of drafts, and that's functionally where he's going.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think what I've seen from him on tape, and obviously now we're getting some verified information from the coaching staff that they like a lot of what they see. Problem is Miles Price is also like, he's considered the leader of that team, the leader in that room. He is one of the guys. He's not, and it is an offense that can definitely support 2 slot wide receivers. They're going to play 4 wide pretty much at all times. So I just wonder how many, and then, we've also got some of the boundary wide receivers that I kind of like their situation there too. It's just a lot of mouths to feed. It's kind of that same situation as Tennessee in their wide receiver room. And it's like, okay, do I just sit back and wait for whoever's got the most value, or do I actually have a guy that I've got a firm stance on in this room?
Well, I mean, that's what we got burned last year by Miles Price.
We did.
Playing the same game, although the ADP is a lot lower for McCray, because I think we kind of learned our lesson at least a little bit.
Yeah, and I think with Zach Kittley, a lot of people are going to be perfectly fine paying up for some of these wide receivers and taking the chance that you might get burned again, just because the payoff can be so significant in this Zach Kittley offense and how often they throw the ball and how they utilize the slot position historically. So I think it can be a risk worth taking, but know that it also can be a little bit of a risk. But good to hear Dre McCray kind of making some headlines already, just a couple of practices in here. Let's move over to South Beach, Miami. We've got Colby Young as somebody who is looking like he's starting to separate as the wide receiver 1 for Miami. A lot of reports are that he has transformed his body and that he has cut some weight a little bit, but has really put on good weight. Like he is no longer somebody that is soft by any means. He has put on some really good weight and looking strong out there. And apparently he also has a strong connection with quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. So a lot of good reports coming out from there. Obviously, they've got the new offensive coordinator. What are your thoughts on Colby Young and that Miami offense as a whole?
I am cautiously optimistic. How about that? How about that?
Because of Mario?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically exclusively because of Mario.
Right.
I like the hire they made of Shannon Dawson. I actually think that's the right mindset.
Right.
They had Rhett Lashley there 2 years ago under the previous staff. If Mario can get out of his way, I don't know that he can. And I'm really excited for Colby Young because I actually think Colby Young's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's a player that I think can lead this wide receiver room, be productive. He's only been at Miami for a year, right? I mean, he transferred in from. He was at a community college though.
He was. He went to JUCO. He transferred last year, was his first year there, and he was really pretty far down the depth chart until a few weeks into the season, and then all of a sudden he came on really strong.
Yeah, he's a big dude too.
He is.
So I wonder if they're gonna, in a goal line role, especially like if they're willing to throw in the red zone, he probably has a lot more value than anybody else in that team. I mean, he's what 6'5", 220.
Yeah,
big dude.
He is. Yeah, he kind of towers over everybody in that wide receiver room. I'm fairly interested in it. I'm with you. I get the hesitation with Mario Cristobal. I am with you. I like Shannon Dawson. I think it's a good hire. If he lets Dawson do his thing, he is. I think that there's some potential for Colby Young. I liked what I saw out of him on the field last year. I mean, the guy made some. His catch radius is a mile wide. He can really bring it down. So if they're able to air it out a little bit there, I like the potential that I see with Colby Young. But man, I totally get it. And Mario loves to dabble, and he loves to ground and pound and slow things down to a screeching halt. So
where do you feel comfortable taking him in drafts?
Colby Young?
Yeah.
I have him as right around my wide receiver. I think it's somewhere around 38 to 40, somewhere in that range. Oh,
so hot, probably high. I just took him around 21 of a draft.
Yeah.
And I think you could probably go earlier than that.
He's the guy that even before I started seeing some of these spring camp reports, he was the guy that I was most willing to take a shot on. If they do open up that offense, I think because of where Shannon Dawson's from and working under Dana Holgorsen, I haven't also counted out Xavier Restrepo because like we saw from Tank Dell and like we've seen in the past at West Virginia, the slot position can be a pretty big factor in that type of offense. So, but I just think Colby Young, probably the best wide receiver, and we're starting to see some reports that are kind of verifying that thought process. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with him. Pretty flexible early on though with him.
Yeah. I don't want to force, I think he's a better player than Xavier Restrepo is. And so I don't want to force that same, like, hey, he's a slot, target slot. Like,
yeah.
I think this is one where it's like position agnostic, best player. Cause we've never seen Dawson be an offensive coordinator, have we? Or at least not in the last like decade or so.
No, I mean he called plays there at Houston for the last year and a half, but
true.
But even that is debatable. As I wrote in my report, there are definitely some rumors that he lost his play calling duties after they lost to, I think it was Tulane last year. He got kind of stripped of that duty, and that Dana actually took it back over, and that's when they kind of really shot off last year at Houston. So yeah, but that other
I just
than
assume that Holgorsen calls the plays like 20 the whole
right.
time.
Yeah. And
or at least you run his system and he tells you what to call.
And it sounds like Houston's going back to that this year. It's going to be Dana calling the plays. Well, let's go over to Notre Dame here. And let's talk about a potential position change. Word is that running back Chris Tyree has actually been moved to the slot and is competing with Jaden Thomas and, interestingly enough, Jaden Greathouse at the slot position. So a strange mix of players there. Chris Tyree standing next to Jaden Thomas, and Jaden Greathouse has to be kind of funny. seeing the different body types there. But they said right now they are just trying it out. It's nothing that is set in stone with Tyree. But the staff just wants to find ways to get him on the field, get him the ball, because they think he's a dynamic player. Do you think this can work with him moving to that position?
I don't know. I think he's a really talented player, but I don't think he's a good running back.
I think more than anything, the writing is on the wall for him that, hey man, running back ain't it for you. We've got bodies there that are pretty good, and you're no better than an RB3 on this team. So let's try you out at slot. Am I crazy for thinking that that's pretty much what's happening here?
No, he's following the Seven McGee path, right? Yep. Undersized running back who's a really good pass catcher, move him to the slot.
Yeah.
Seven McGee's, he transferred out of Oregon. He's like Nevada or something now.
Something. I thought maybe he even went FCS, but yeah. What are your thoughts on the other two in this room? Because they are very interesting. You talk about a big slot. Jaden Greathouse.
Jackson State, you're right. Sorry.
And yeah, Jaden Greathouse and Jaden Thomas are also in this inside receiver position in this room. What are your thoughts on that?
I have no idea. I don't think Jaden Greathouse is ready to start week 1. That's surprising me. I don't even know if Jaden Thomas is really that quality of a player. I think this would be a really interesting season for Notre Dame because I don't think they have a good replacement for Michael Mayer, at least even close to the same level of athlete that he was at tight end. So you're going to need to leverage wide receivers. And they were bottom 10 in terms of receiving yards accumulated by the receiver position last year. That concerns me in general. There's not really an offensive piece that I want to target that bad on this team. Even though I really like Sam Hartman. Yeah. It's just concerning. Like, I don't that Jaden Thomas and Jaden Greathouse are the two options. I feel like you should have someone better.
I'll give quick thoughts on Jaden Greathouse. So he's the incoming freshman from Texas that's coming in, 4-star wide receiver there. I've watched a little bit of his tape. There's nothing about him that screamed slot wide receiver to me. My thoughts are maybe this is he's not a really dynamic athlete, in my opinion, from what I saw, just movement skills wise. I wonder if maybe on down the road that they bulk him up and he almost becomes kind of like a tight end type of player. I know that sounds crazy. A lot of people are really high on him as far as wide receiver, but I didn't love some of the tape that I saw on him. And I'm with you, Jaden Thomas. He's fine, but it's maybe a situation where if Chris Tyree does show out, he can kind of win this job. Just because there's not a ton of competition there for him. So who knows? You could end up having a little bit of value left with your Chris Tyree shares after all. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
Interesting if he has eligibility, by the way, on Fantrax, if he keeps RB eligibility.
Yeah, that's true.
Slot receiver.
And if he does become that slot receiver, I really hope that Fantrax gives kind of that dual eligibility, because it wouldn't be out of the question that he also sees some snaps, in the backfield, especially if there's any injuries or anything like that. So
might be interesting.
We'll see how it plays out. Let's move over to Central Florida. And if you thought DeMarcus Bowman was gone from the face of the earth, he has reappeared. He is on his second transfer now. The former Clemson, former Florida Gator running back, now turned UCF running back. DeMarcus Bowman has apparently been impressing the staff over there at UCF with some of their practices. Word is that he and Harvey have been the 1-2 punch running with the ones in practice at running back there. And I don't know what to make of this. I keep thinking that DeMarcus Bowman is just a figment of our imagination and that he's not a real person. Do you buy any of this, Chris?
No. What do you no? Like, didn't he? So he went from he lost a ton of weight,
right?
Which is already a problem. he's like
still at
190-ish now.
Yeah, 187, 190. He's kind of in that range, and I think this is year year 4 for him. So I think we can safely say that's what he is. He is no more than 187 to 190.
He weighed less than that when he was at Florida too. I think he weighed at like 180 or something. He lost a ton of weight at one point, and I was like, "What is going on with this dude?" Until I see him on the field playing well, I refuse to acknowledge that it is Marcus Bowman time. The Marcus Bowman time.
I think I'm 100% with you there. I cannot buy into this until I actually see him getting carries and he actually looks productive with them. But I think so. He got 0 production last year. Are we safe to say that was because it was his second transfer and he was not a grad transfer, so he had to sit out last year, right? Like that's his situation.
Yeah,
right?
he would have had.
Yeah. So it does show that the NCAA actually may not give a waiver to everybody. But yeah, I can't buy into it. I got to see him on the field doing stuff. Bottom line.
Yeah, he needs to be there for it to happen. I need to see him on the field. I'm dead serious. I don't care how hyped he is.
Let's go all the way across the country, all the way over to San Diego State. Let's talk a little bit here for just a minute. They had their spring game actually on, I think it was Friday of last week. Didn't get a ton of information out of some of the reports that I was looking for. I tried to dig. Hopefully Matt can maybe find a little bit more. But we did get a couple things, and that is what the quarterback room looks like there. Obviously, this is Jalen Mayden's job. He kind of came out of nowhere last year. He was playing safety initially over there at San Diego State. They had some injuries, had some poor quarterback play. They tried him there because that's what he was before he transferred from Mississippi State. Turns out worked out pretty well for him. He finished the season pretty strong. However, he did not have a strong spring game here. He threw for 219 yards, but he had 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. The quarterback room as a whole had 5 interceptions in the game. Apparently it was a spring game just absolutely dominated by the defense. Does this worry you at all, Chris? Is this just kind of what we expect from the San Diego State defense?
I mean, it's what I expect from Jalen Mayden. I mean, he
not a Jalen Mayden fan, huh?
He played fine last year at the end of the year, but I mean, did he have a game where he was over like 60% completion in the last couple weeks? Probably not. I remember his bowl game; he didn't complete 20 passes. I can tell you that, and he threw 3 picks, and I think he had 3 fumbles or something. It was a horrendous performance. The reason that they lost that game, despite MTSU being a substantially worse team, I have very little faith in Jalen Mayden passing. He's a really good athlete and has a really good rusher with big upside. So if the offensive line is a little bit better, it's kind of interesting. They're going to be more pass heavy this year than I think they've done in the past, which is going to be interesting. Depending how deep your league is, I think you can. Well, I think he's being drafted anyway, and I think that's probably right. But wide receiver Mekhi Shaw is kind of interesting if they do follow through and being pass heavy.
He's a name that does continue to pop up on some of these spring practice reports, Mekhi Shaw. So I think that's a good call. As far as Mayden's concerned, I think I had a little bit of hopes for him because, like you said, the word is that they are going to try to pass the ball a little bit more this year. He is somebody that I thought maybe could develop with more time under center since he was out of, playing a totally different position up until part of the season last year. So I thought maybe he could develop. But yeah, this performance doesn't exactly make you feel all warm and fuzzy if you're looking to draft him at the end of your drafts. But I'm probably not going to put too much stock into it. He's still a guy that I might be interested in taking a late round flyer on and just kind of seeing how it goes.
He also, his value probably wildly differs depending on how many points you get for passing touchdowns. Because he's way more interesting in a 4-point per passing touchdown league than a 6-point passing touchdown league.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Let's talk about a couple of injuries. Unfortunately, not all news is good news here from some of these spring reports. The first one we're going to touch on here is Texas A&M wide receiver and their star wide receiver, really, which is Evan Stewart apparently had a ankle injury. At the time of the report that I was reading over this weekend, a little bit unknown kind of what the situation is here. Timetable for his return is unknown, but it does sound likely that he is done for the spring. So kind of a bummer because we wanted to see him get that full spring with the new OC there, with Connor Wiegman, having a full spring, the two of them kind of building that rapport. Any thoughts on Evan Stewart and his ankle injury? Are you an Evan Stewart guy? Are you looking for him in drafts, or is he somebody that you'll generally pass on?
He goes too early for me, given that I don't know that the offense. So he's a top 10 round pick, or has been at least from ADP that I've looked at and just drafts. That's kind of high, although I do think he's a really good player. He's probably my top wide receiver in that class if we're ranking them today. I need to know how bad this ankle injury is because I think he could have a really productive. I think he could have a 1,000-yard season. It worries me. How bad the injury is, and I don't know that Bobby Petrino's actually calling plays. I don't know if you saw the interview that.
I saw it.
He's like, we'll address it when the time comes or something like that. You just brought in a new OC for like a demand from the athletic department to do so, buddy. Like, are you really going to keep doing this?
Jimbo's got to beat his chest every once in a while when he gets the opportunity to, especially when the AD and fans think they can push Jimbo into a corner. He will let them know my contract's fully guaranteed. You guys need to shut up. I'll call plays if I want to. That's who knows what that situation is there, and it's going to be such a beautiful disaster. I cannot wait for the Bobby Petrino Jimbo Fisher marriage. It's going to be awesome. Until we get more news on Evan Stewart, it's not going to change my thoughts. If you like Evan Stewart, continue to draft Evan Stewart. If you don't, continue to pass on him unless we hear that this is a serious injury, a fracture, or something that's going to require surgery. But if it's just something that's going to keep him out, don't worry about it. Talking about another wide receiver that is also injured, moving over to TCU, true freshman wide receiver, 4-star Cordell Russell has apparently broken his collarbone from what we've heard out of their spring practice reports. So his spring is done as well. Generally, broken collarbones 6 to 8 weeks is what you look at. Not something that is a long term or something that is going to limit him. I would not think in the fall. But this is a guy that apparently had been looking pretty good as soon as he arrived on campus there. We're talking about a big, very athletic wide receiver. Has some really nice comps from an athletic profile on our comp page over at C2C. What are your thoughts on Cordell Russell? Do you think this impacts him in any way and his ability to move up that depth chart to be a player that TCU can count on this fall?
I was going to ask you what the timetable recovery looked like. So now that I know that, I'm less concerned. I hate that he lost the practice time. That's my biggest issue.
Sure.
From a health standpoint, probably fine. It sounds like. I just hate that he lost it because their spring practice just started last week. So it wasn't like they were halfway through or almost done wrapping up. He got hurt one of the first days of practice, which stinks for him because he is, like you said, an incredible athlete. We have him 99th percentile speed score, just like 6'2". I think he's like 210, 205.
Yeah. Really
special player athletically. I'm going to be following him in the fall pretty closely, especially from like a CFF dynasty standpoint. Like, he's somebody that I'm really, really interested in because they lost so much production this year and they have really good players, but I think he fits well with like the Jordan Hudson types. Like, I think he's just as talented or more talented. So
it's a weird wide receiver room in that obviously there's some attrition there and it's a lot of transfers. I mean, they got a lot of transfers coming in and they had a couple of nice, between Hudson and Allen, DJ Allen, they had a couple of nice freshmen from last year that are held over to this year. And now he comes in and whenever I was watching the All-American game that he was playing in, the high school All-American game, I watched him run a couple routes and I'm like, who is this behemoth of a wide receiver out there just towering over some of these wide receivers? And I started looking it up and I was like, I can get why people are pretty excited about the athletic profile for him, because it's pretty impressive. So yeah, that's the bummer part. I don't think it's going to impact him in any way as far as his, once he's healthy, but it's just a bummer that he's missing out in the spring.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's go over to Purdue and talk about their QB situation. So new OC, Graham Harrell, comes in from West Virginia and formerly of USC, and he brings his air raid type offense and kind of makes you a little interested in what that QB room, the makeup of it might look like. They get in transfer Hudson Card from Texas, who lost out in competition with Quinn Ewers. And then even though he was once in the portal, he pulled back out. Brady Allen is also there in that quarterback room. And word is from Graham Harrell himself is that Hudson Card is way ahead as far as his ability to understand the concepts and the scheme. He said his experience level is very obvious when they're out there on the field with all the quarterbacks together, and that Hudson Card has a chance to be, quote, special, which is not how we've described Hudson Card in a long time. But, he was a guy that was, a top 5 to 7 QB recruit when he was coming out in his class. Yeah. So I can see how the potential is there. Are you buying this? Does Hudson Card interest you at all, Chris?
As like a last round depth quarterback, if he's like my 4 or 5, maybe.
Yeah.
Is
he somebody 5, you've done best balls so far, and I haven't yet. Is he somebody that has been taken that you've noticed in drafts, or is he just still sitting there towards the very end?
He goes within the last 3 or 4 rounds.
Okay.
Generally speaking, and I think that makes sense, right? Graham Harrell will bring good passing concepts, and they will throw more than I thought they would. I really liked the hire of Ryan Walters. Was concerned who he would bring in as an OC, and this kind of proved that he isn't probably not going to be the traditional defensive head coach takes over and limits the offensive production. So yeah. I think it's positive in that aspect. I just don't really know what to expect heading into this year, because they lost Payne Durham and Chuck Sizzle. So who steps up in this passing game? Do they have the depth to pull that off? I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah. Absolutely. Does it worry you at all for Brady Allen? I don't get there are Brady Allen stands out there, and I have to say I don't get it. I get he's big, he's strong arm. He was in a Braum offense. Now he's in a Harrell offense. But man, this dude was the QB4 last year. He's now clearly the QB2. At what point do we say, okay, this guy just doesn't have it?
I think you can probably cut bait. You can probably cut bait at the end of this year. You could probably cut bait now if you wanted to. At least, you don't have to drop him, but move him for maybe a higher upside piece if you wanted to. Right? So Card has at least 2 more years of eligibility.
I think he has 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Brady Allen probably needs to transfer out, or he needs to beat Card. Doesn't sound like he's going to beat Card now. So you have another wasted year of Allen. So going into year 3, you don't have anybody who started, a player who has not started a game, if assuming health and everything. He's going to transfer out. And he's going to have to probably go G5.
Is he a transfer candidate after spring?
He could be if he realizes the writing's on the wall. Right? He's already entered the portal once.
That's what I'm saying, man. This is a guy. If you get your offensive coordinator saying, quote, your competition is special, you've already entered the transfer portal once. What's stopping you from going again?
Yeah, that's rookie mistake by Graham Harrell not saying, oh, it's a really close competition. Just lying. So you have depth.
Let's talk about another Big Ten QB room here. The beauty of Wisconsin football under their new coaching staff is that every single practice, all 15 of them, are going to be open to the public. And so we are already getting some really good information. And they literally let the reporters stay for the entire practice. So they were writing down the early, very early, just a couple of practices in, depth chart here. And at quarterback, not a big surprise, Tanner Mordecai, transfer from SMU, formerly of Oklahoma, is was the clear QB1. He took every snap with the QBs, with the first team offense. Also interesting here, though, is QB2 was not Nick Evers. It was actually Braden Lockie, who is a transfer from Mississippi State. All three quarterbacks here are transfers. And that QB3 was actually Nick Evers. And Nick Evers was splitting the QB3 reps. Lockie was the clear QB2. Now, that's not to say that in practice 3, they don't mix it up and give Nick Evers, his run at QB2. But what are your early thoughts on this quarterback room and how that's kind of playing out?
I had been told last year that Nick Evers struggled a little bit when he got on campus at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I may have heard that from someone here today.
And
so I have, this does not surprise me, just based on knowing that and the coverage that you had done on Nick Evers, and just like people were really excited that when he went there that he could beat out Tanner Mordecai. There was never at all any question in my mind that it was going to be Tanner Mordecai's job. So I'm glad that practices are playing out that way, because I didn't expect anything different. I'm excited about this offense though, because I think they have some skill on the outside, and it's definitely going to be a new approach.
Yeah. And
I think it's probably better for Braylon Allen. Like, I think this is like a rising tide lifts all ships situation. Like, he's not going to face eight, 9-man boxes consistently.
Absolutely. They did release the wide receiver depth chart as well, too. I know that Bell and DK were running with the ones. I was unfamiliar with who the other there was a third wide receiver running with the ones. I was not familiar with his name. I can't remember it off the top of my head. It does sound like Williams, the transfer from USC, was running with the 2s, and I believe Bryson Green, the transfer from Oklahoma State, has been dinged up, and he was limited in practice, so he was not running with any of them really at this point. So just something to keep an eye on there. Like Chris mentioned, totally new offense. We covered it on Devy Debate last week, where this isn't going to look like your normal Wisconsin Badger offense. So keep an eye on kind of how that wide receiver room looks coming into the fall camp. So that pretty much wraps up what we're looking at with spring. Again, if you aren't following Matt Bruning and listening to his spring camp reports, then you're really missing out. If you want that information, if you're doing any drafts right now, whether it be best balls, whether it be your C2C drafts, anything like that, you really need to check out what Matt's doing, because it's really good information there. Let's turn the page here over and talk about some bounce back candidates. We both have a handful of players here that we think have the potential to, kind of bounce back. These are guys that could, after we were either really high on them last year, or maybe just didn't pan out after, for whatever reason, injury, coaching situation, just on-field performance. But we think maybe after a busted season or, underperforming season, that these guys could rebound and actually have a pretty nice year. Some of these guys are going to vary as far as our overall value on them and where you can get them in drafts. Some of them are going much higher than others, but we think that they're potential candidates to kind of take off here. So let's dive right in. The first one that I want to discuss here is Miami quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. We've already touched on the Miami offense a little bit here and some of our concerns with Mario Cristobal constantly micromanaging, but Shannon Dawson has been hired from Dana Holgorsen, the offensive coordinator, formerly the offensive coordinator at Houston is where Dawson was. I think this gives Tyler Van Dyke a opportunity to see more of what we saw when Rhett Lashley was the offensive coordinator there at Miami. You probably wouldn't have found anybody that was more cold on Tyler Van Dyke going into last year than I was. I was just totally off on Miami. I hated it's not just Cristobal, it was the combination of Gaddis and Cristobal. It's like those two, there was nobody at any point in that room to say, hey, why don't we push the tempo a little bit here today? So I was totally off Tyler Van Dyke, but I think he could be in line for a little bit of a rebound season. and they could open that up. And this is a guy that averaged close to 28 points per game at the end of that 2021 season. And then I think he was down around like 15, 16 points per game last year. It wasn't pretty. I think he could push more in that kind of mid-20s range. Do you think that's remotely possible, or do you think Mario is just going to have his finger too much on that offense?
Kind of what we talked about before. I see the path to it. I don't know. I saw what he did to Justin Herbert. I saw what he did to Tyler Van Dyke last year. I need to see Tyler Van Dyke do it. Maybe I just need to see their game plan week 1. That's going to tell me everything I need to know. At that point, I'm probably too late, and Van Dyke's already had for the bounce back. But you're getting him at such a discount where it probably doesn't even matter if you want to take a shot at him as a QB3, QB4. I
think that's where the value lies. There is that so many people are going to be swayed by what they saw from him last year, and I think you can get him at a cheap enough price to where even if we don't see the offense take off like I think maybe it could, it's not going to cost you much, and that's kind of the value there. So that's somebody that I think. Let's move on to one of your bounce back candidates here. Let's talk about Rasheen Ali, running back. Marshall, obviously somebody that had a monster 2021. I mean, you talk about a guy that was just unbelievable, really kind of coming out of nowhere. I know Kyle Francis was somebody that actually had discussed Rasheen Ali a little bit before that 2021 season. And I'll be damned if he wasn't right, because Ali just kind of broke out in a big way. But 2022, not so much. Word was early on maybe some off personal stuff going on kept him from being on the field. And then we found out later on, he was just injured. And he came back towards the end of the year, kind of took that role back. But Kalen LeBourne had proven that he was good enough to where that was kind of a split backfield even at the end of the season. Talk to me about Rasheen Ali and why you think he's a strong bounce back candidate.
Yeah, that pissed me off so much that Charles Huff hid behind he's away from the team.
Right.
Yeah, technically, probably because he's rehabbing an injury that he had in fall camp last year. I don't understand why we needed to even use mental health as an excuse here. Just it was ridiculous. Bottom line, when it came out at the bowl game that he'd been injured the whole time, I think it was like a slip of the tongue. And I was like, you SOB.
There were so many thoughts and prayers going out for Rasheen Ali early in the season, man. And not that they weren't warranted. He was still injured, but man, yeah, when you make it sound like it's a mental health thing, turns out it's just kind of like a knee scope. So we're all good now.
Yeah, and maybe part of it was mental health with the recovery, but certainly not the main driver based on Charles Huff's comments later. What we saw from Ali 2 seasons ago was 23 touchdowns. One of the most utilized players in both the receiving and the rushing game in the country. Marshall returned 70% of their offensive production on the offensive line. I think that's really important in terms of consistency because they were good last year rushing team. Kalen LeBourne is gone. I think he's being drafted highly, so this isn't like a surprise to anybody, but just me saying I have complete confidence in him rebounding to at least being like a top 5 back, top 6 back.
I think I have him as my RB2. Am I too high? And
I think top is good.
We talked about this last year too. He was somebody that we debated because I was higher on him. I had him as my RB1 going into last year. And we, a lot of us at Campus Canton thought that maybe that was a little bit too high. So maybe I'll get burned again. I don't know. I hope he's able to bounce back. But I'm with you. I'm all in on Rasheen Ali. It's an offense. We want that running back position, man. They've proven that they can churn out high end fantasy producers there.
Yeah, he specifically gave us what we were looking for. I mean, at the end of the year, he had 100-yard game and then almost like a 90+ yard game as well. It's we saw who he was at the end of the year. This is a guy who's an incredible player. We just need to have him not get hurt / mental health again. I don't know.
Let's take a look at a guy that a little bit further down in I'm sure everybody's rankings, if he's even ranked at all, and that is Old Dominion quarterback Hayden Wolf. So I'm going to caveat this by saying this is a guy that probably isn't even being taken in drafts. Had a little bit of interest going into last season, just because he was coming off of a strong finish in 2021, and they had some nice pieces in that offense last year at wide receiver and tight end. But this is a guy that underperformed last year, kind of lost his job at times, and is now in the midst of a quarterback competition there at ODU. So he hasn't even won the job yet. But here's why I think he's a strong bounce back candidate, and it is strictly because of coaching change. Kevin Decker is the new offensive coordinator there at Old Dominion, and he was previously at Fordham for the last 4 years. And if you've read my coaching article on the Sun Belt coaching changes, then you could probably pick up that I'm kind of high on what they've got going on there at Old Dominion, because I think this is a really strong hire. Kevin Decker is a guy that studied the Josh Heupel offense, the Baylor veer and shoot. That is what he ran at Fordham, and he last year led his conference, and I want to say he was maybe second in FCS in scoring. They averaged around 49 points per game, around 400 passing yards per game. I mean, this is an all-out, looks very similar to what you saw last year at Tennessee with Josh Heupel. So I'm betting, because of his experience, that Hayden Wolf wins this job. If he does, I think he's a real good sleeper candidate to have a nice return on your investment. So that's kind of my thoughts. Have you had any consideration for Hayden Wolf at all, Chris?
So I have not, and it's not necessarily because of the new offense, which is like it's Tennessee's offense, like you said, which is exactly what we want at this level too, because you can exploit weaker athletes a lot better. And so I just don't know who those athletes are going to be that he's throwing the ball to, right?
Sure.
Blake Watson transferred to Memphis. Allie Jennings transferred to Virginia Tech, and Zach Kuntz declared for the NFL draft. I don't know. So if we believe in Hayden Wolf's bounce back, and I think he will have a bounce back, I think you're right there. Who is the primary beneficiary? Because I just don't know who that is.
I think it's probably Javon Harvey. Would be my guess, just because he's the most seasoned guy in that room. He's kind of considered the leader of the wide receivers there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a total projection on my part. And like I said, I can't even project that he's technically going to win the job. The Decker actually brought the backup quarterback from Fordham with him over to Old Dominion. And I don't know if this guy's any good. He's a backup because the starter was an All-American at the FCS level. He just didn't have a chance. And the starter was a 4-year starter there at Fordham. So who knows? But clearly the other guy that he brought with him knows the system very well. But I think
this is shooting from deep. This is calling your shot.
This is pretty deep. He's a guy that if I were in a best ball right now, and I'm looking to take a shot on a late quarterback, I actually probably would take a shot on Hayden Wolf. I think there's virtually no risk, and I think he could bounce back pretty nicely this year.
He has been drafted in each of the drafts that almost every one of the drafts I've been in that at least go beyond 25 rounds. He's been drafted. So
very nice.
At that price, the upside is massive.
Sure.
Considering the offense and system. So I can't hate it.
Okay. Let's move on to a guy, a name that everybody's familiar with, obviously, and that would be Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers. This is a guy that you have put on the show sheet here as a bounce back candidate. Obviously, Ewers, 5-star, All-American everything coming out of high school, spent a little bit of time at Ohio State, got a cup of coffee there with Ryan Day, and then moved on to Steve Sarkisian. This will be his second season as a starting quarterback there at Texas. Last year definitely had its shares of ups and downs, despite what Matt Bruning would like for you to believe. He was not great at times. But what makes you believe that we should jump back onto the Quinn Ewers bandwagon here?
So
is it the fact that he got a haircut? Is that it?
That's part of it. He looked like you take him a lot more seriously now than he looked like Joe Dirt. Now he looks like just a regular old Texas high school quarterback. He definitely helps the perception, right? I'm not sure how high I can have a bad mullet ranked. But besides that key element, I think he was hurt last year more than was led on. Okay. He had that shoulder injury that knocked him out of the Alabama game. Then he had a hand injury where he was wearing gloves in his hand, which is something that he had never done previously. And he said that it was for a bad nail that fell off or something, but he wore it for a long time and his play was really bad afterwards. I just wonder if there was more there, right? But when we saw him in the Alabama game, we saw a player who could be a top 3 quarterback in the country at the time.
Sure.
That was phenomenal, right? 0.67 EPA per play, 11.2 yards per play. And he only played 2 drives in that game. They were way on their way to upsetting them. Texas offense has me really interested, right? 49.6 neutral game script pass rate, which is 2.7% above average. We know that Steve Sarkisian can produce good offense, good offensive players, good schemes. I do believe Quinn Ewers is not going to lose that job to Arch Manning this year. And so I want that type of player. I like the players that they've surrounded him with. Xavier Worthy gives a deep threat when he can catch the ball. Jonte Cook is an awesome incoming freshman. Isaiah Neal is kind of like a possession guy on the outside. I don't think he can separate very well, but he does give him a big option outside. I like the transfer of A.D. Mitchell. They have a ton of depth still there with Whittington. So I think it's a really good situation for him to succeed. And I think they're going to pass more because they lost Bijan Robinson. I don't think the guys behind him are nearly as good. It'll probably be a committee. I don't think you're going to have to rely on the rush game the same way they did last year. So I am in at quarterback 20. Everyone else has him outside the top 35. There's so much there for him to succeed.
I am 100% in agreement with you with the weapons that he has surrounding him. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a better wide receiver room in the country. And obviously a coach that has a history of producing some really strong fantasy relevant quarterbacks. So 100% agree with you there. I think my biggest concern is when we talk about him moving up inside that top 20 of QBs, whenever I'm looking to draft somebody in that range, for me, 2 things have to happen. And that quarterback either has to have big rush upside to get me a close to 1,000 yards or 10 touchdowns, or that quarterback's got to have big passing volume upside. I'm talking about a Mike Leach, a Zach Kitley, a Ben Arbuckle type of system. And I don't know that I can place him in either one of those buckets. And so that's my only concern with Quinn Ewers in that high. I do think it's a very efficient. He has a chance to be a very efficient quarterback.
That is the path to success.
Yeah.
They will not get to the point where they're throwing 55, 60% in neutral game scripts. That's just very few offenses get there. I just think that the weapons line themselves up where he's going to have a 23 for 30 game, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's the path, not a 50 attempt game. So yes, it's betting on the efficiency and the surrounding talent. He is going as quarterback 23 in our ADP currently. That's probably high for what it's worth.
Okay.
And I have him ranked 20, but I have seen him go much later than that in drafts. He's generally speaking available in round 15 to 20 range.
Okay. And
I'm taking him there. I think there's just the upside, but I also took him last year in round 4. So.
I will say that I do think he's somebody that has a really high floor. He's not losing that. He's not losing that job unless he just is god awful against Alabama. And even still, what are they going to do? Throw a true freshman in there? I guess it could happen. That's what happened with Caleb Williams and Spencer Rattler. But I do think he's got a strong floor. So getting him in that round 15 to 20 range, I don't hate. So let's move to another guy that's a little bit of shooting from deep here. And bounce back candidate here for me is Nathaniel Pete, running back over at Missouri. This is a guy that a lot of us, myself, I know Mike Bainbridge was pretty high on him going into last year, but this is a guy that was we had projected as a top 20 running back, top 25 running back going into last season. And most of that is because we want an Eli Drinkowitz running back. I mean, we saw it with Tyler Beatty and how much volume he got. Nathaniel Pete had transferred in from Stanford. He was in the midst of kind of trying, to win that running back competition. He got the carries early on and had some inopportune, turnovers. He fumbled the ball in the back of the end zone, which cost them one of their games last year. I think, was it Kentucky maybe? Can't remember which game it was. But anyways, he had some poor turnovers, untimely turnovers, ended up kind of losing that job to Cody Schrader, who was a walk-on transfer from, I think, Truman State. Here's why Nathaniel Pete is a bounce-back candidate for me. We do have some pretty good spring reports so far. The staff saying that he looks improved. He looks like he's taken the offseason seriously. That's nice. We've got a new coordinator in that when we saw what Jordan Mims did last year, he had over 280 touches. So we've got a good system where they will use a workhorse. We still have a Cody Schrader problem, right? He's still there. But Cody Schrader didn't exactly set the world on fire when he was playing. We talk about one of the least efficient running backs in the SEC last year. One thing that I liked is I kind of dove into the numbers with Nathaniel Pete. He had a really strong breakaway percentage, and like a breakaway rush percentage. He was like, I want to say he was like top 10 to 12 in the country. And obviously some of his carries were limited. I think he only had like around 120 carries or something like that. But I started to look at the trend, and historically, those top 10 breakaway percentage guys had really strong seasons the following season. Like if you have that ability to be a game breaker, it really kind of allows you to be a strong fantasy asset. So that's why I'm kind of projecting him as somebody that maybe he wins this job back and we see a little bit closer to what we had expected from him the year before. Chris, do you think I'm just totally off my rocker and thinking that maybe he could be where we thought he might be?
No, I don't think you're crazy.
Okay, good.
Cody Schrader still being there is kind of a bummer, but I agree. I don't think he was really that impressive. I think it's a team that runs really well. I'm really interested to see who gets passing work here. And I think I would lean Pete in that aspect.
Probably.
Because, right, Kirby Moore is the new offense coordinator. And I think that he was under Kalen DeBoer at Fresno State, and that was a team that passed a lot to their running backs.
Sure.
And so I think Pete has that edge, just like based on his skill set and body type. So if that's the case, then I'm definitely in on Pete. And like, I don't even think he's being drafted currently. So
right. And I think that's more kind of what I wanted to point out, that I think that he, again, kind of like Hayden Wolf, he's another guy maybe you take as a late round flyer and just kind of see what happens. Maybe you handcuff him with Cody Schrader. But yeah, to your point, Eli Drinkowitz also loves to pass to the running back. We saw that Tyler Beatty had close to 50 catches or whatever a couple years ago. So yeah, I think late round potential there is kind of where I'd put it. Let's discuss your guy here, quarterback Clay Millen, as a rebound candidate here. That's the quarterback for Colorado State that followed that staff over from Nevada whenever they had that transition last year. Obviously, similar to Pete, a guy that we were drafting in kind of that QB 25 range or so. I think that this is year two with him as starter. Do we see him kind of bounce back now that he's had a year under his belt? Is he capable of producing where we thought he might be able to?
So last year was really bad. the entire Colorado State team.
It was awful.
Most of that stems from the offensive line. The offensive line was horrendous. And that was a lot of players who were already in the program. They didn't have the depth. Players transferred out. They brought some of them from Nevada when Jay Norvell took that job. But generally speaking, it was in shambles. 124th in pass block rate, 129th in run block rate per PFF. They bring in 3 transfers in the portal, and all 3 of them are FCS transfers. But like, where are you really going to get a transfer for Colorado State, right? One of their defensive linemen converted to offensive line. It's year 2 in a new blocking scheme. I think there's more reason to be optimistic this year that the line won't be as bad. I think that's a key consideration. So they just could not pass as much as Jay Norvell wants to pass. So at Nevada, his last 3 seasons, 62.8% neutral game script pass rate. Generally speaking, he was top 5 in the country. Almost every single season, maybe at minimum top 7, because there's a pretty big cutoff between teams that just throw, and those are pass happy. And so Norvell falls into that air raid type mentality. Last year at Colorado State, 43.4 neutral game script pass rate, 20% less because they could not pass the ball. Given their offensive line, they did not have enough time to throw, and Milne suffered because of that. I like the pieces that are there in the offense. I think their wide receiver room is pretty good. They do return Torrey Horton, who we're really high on. I think it could be a bounce back for Clay Milne. Even if they just pass more, his stats are going to be better. Even give him half of what Jay Norvell traditionally has done, and you're going to see a rebound statistically, period. I just really like that the offense has a lot more potential in year 2 of a system.
I'm with you here. I think we can't overlook the fact of it was a massive change that Colorado State had to make to go from that offense that with Steve Adazio.
Worst offensive mind in the country right now.
To go from that, a total 180 in scheme and stylistically what you're wanting to do as an offense, to go from Steve Adazio to an air raid. I mean, the offensive coordinator that works underneath Norvell there is literally the son of the developer of the air raid. I mean, this is an air raid in every sense. And to have a 43% neutral game script pass rate is just bonkers when you think about it. So, yes, I'm 100% with you. I have some concerns that we haven't seen Clay Milne be successful. So that's a little concerning, but they didn't really go after anybody in the portal, right? I mean, they had the opportunity to try to upgrade that QB room, and they said, no, we're good. We're going to stick with Clay Milne. So
no, they brought back the same thing. He only had, sorry, not to cut you off, but he had 23 attempts per game.
Yeah, that's crazy.
As an area quarterback, right? Like what the heck is going on there?
That I think that offensive line was just in total shambles last year. So
they were.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Let's move over to one that I'm going to bring up here. I'll be fairly quick with this one because I really only have one reason for putting him on here, and this bounce back candidate is Cam Porter, running back for Northwestern. We see Evan Hull move on, right? And this is a guy that a couple of years ago, and even at the beginning of last year, kind of split reps with Evan Hull. Cam Porter is a guy that's not a very efficient running back. I have questions on just really how good of a player he is. But we've seen Northwestern, just like we saw with Cam Hull, even though they're bad and they're probably going to be bad again, they still get quite a bit of volume to the running back. They've, and even if they are trailing in games, they will continue to run guys. Everything that I'm reading out of spring camp is that Cam Porter is the clear RB1 there. He's the leader in the room. He's the guy that all the other running backs look up to. So I think he's somebody that probably doesn't put up Evan Hull type numbers, but I think he's somebody that if you took in the end of your drafts is a pretty strong value at that spot. Do you buy into that at all?
I don't hate it.
Okay.
I've actually come around more on him than I think I had been. We've been talking about him in I think our Slack recently. And so Evan Hull is productive. I think Evan Hull's a better running back, which is fine. But Porter looked good 2 years ago. Like we saw some flashes where he was pretty productive. And that was also a bad Northwestern team. That team wasn't quite as bad as this year's team, which is terrible. But you can see the path forward. Like, would it surprise me if at the end of the year he has like 800 yards, 900 yards, and like 10 touchdowns? Like that'll get it done in spot starts or in best ball if he has a big touchdown week. Like that will get you what you need from a player who's barely being drafted. And if he is, he's like, you're taking him basically with no risk. I'm also very curious what the staff does in general this year, because I think Pat Fitzgerald could be fired if they have another like 2-10 season.
Yeah. I was thinking about that the other day. They are essentially the Stanford in every sense of the Big Ten. I mean, they want to continue to just pound the ball, try to work the line of scrimmage, and they're handcuffed in what they can do talent wise because of their academic restrictions. But yeah, it's just just somebody that I was kind of thinking about that I think we put a fair amount of value on him 2 years ago going into drafts, and I think he's somebody that could find his way back into some level of fantasy relevance again. So let's head way out west over here to Hawaii, and one of your guys here, Braden Shager. Somebody that we were fairly high on last year just because of him winning that job, and historically Hawaii's QBs tend to be very lucrative for CFF production. So talk to me about your thoughts on Braden Shager here.
Yeah, I like Shager. I actually really like this whole offense, but he's probably the most noteworthy name. So I think they wanted to implement the run and shoot last year and then realized, okay, we don't have the personnel to do it, and B, it's going to take longer than a season. And so their offense was not at all what I think they wanted to run. It had some elements, but not the run and shoot that I think Chang wants to ultimately do. That changed this spring practice. This spring practice was all about implementing the system, and that system is incredibly valuable for CFF points. Shager is the quarterback one. I don't think there's much competition. I think he's kind of proven at times last year that he was the guy, especially given like a really uneven system, and that program was left in really, really bad shape by Todd Graham when he left. Like there are not a lot of pieces there.
100%.
Yeah, and I think they're building back a lot, and I think that this could be a huge step forward for Hawaii this year, just based on they have the personnel they want. They lost a bunch of passing options to the portal, which narrows it down who I think is going to be productive. I really like Jonah Pinoke, 40 targets in his 7 games. He's primarily an outside wide receiver. He played 90% of his snaps outside last year. I don't want to say a lot of faith. Maybe that's not the right word considering how bad they were last year, but I think there's a lot of upside in this Hawaii offense.
I can buy into that a little bit. I'm not 100% sold on, because I just don't know exactly what this offense is exactly going to look like, and I'm not still 100% sure how good of a quarterback Braden Shager really is, but I do like the run and shoot that he's trying to implement over there. I do like just historically what it's done for quarterbacks. So if he's able to hold on to this job, similar to Clay Millen, I mean, I think that this offense has nowhere to go but up from a passing perspective. So I could see him being somebody fairly relevant, and probably doesn't come at much of a cost, if any, right now in your draft. So I can definitely get on board with that. Let's discuss one last guy that we have here, and that is wide receiver Donovan Green for Wake Forest. This is a guy we've been talking about for a few years now, actually, is probably a bounce back or term it however you want, breakout candidate for the last few years. And A.T. Perry kind of stole the show after a couple of really strong seasons there at Wake Forest. I'm projecting Donovan Green to be somebody that bounces back though, and ends up carrying kind of the theme of all the guys I've listed here today, having some of the value that we thought they were going to have going into 2022. Didn't work out. I think this is mostly about opportunity. With A.T. Perry moving on, I think he is Donovan Green by all reports I've read is a clear starter there on the outside for Wake Forest. It sounds like Griffiths actually looks pretty strong through spring camp early on here.
I thought he looked good when he played too last year.
He did. Yeah, he did. I can't remember who it was they played that game. It was pretty weak competition, but
Vandy.
Was it? They played okay.
Now I'm saying it was weak competition. You're right.
Yeah, but he looks good, and everything indicates that maybe there's not as much of a drop off from Sam Hartman as we thought there would be, and obviously that would be the biggest concern with the wide receivers there. But I think that Donovan Green has a chance to have a really strong season. He's 6'2", he's 210 pounds. They say he's in fantastic shape right now. He's always been a pretty good deep threat and big play option for Wake Forest. Just the consistency and constantly dealing with nagging injuries has been pretty limiting for him. So everything says that he's healthy right now. So I'm willing to kind of label him as that bounce back option there. Do you think this passing game runs through him in any way, or do you think that it's going to be Jamal Banks or any of the other wide receivers there?
No, I think it will be. I'm not ready to label him as the wide receiver one. I just don't necessarily know what to do with Jamal Banks.
Yeah.
But they will both play outside. Those are the two starting outside wide receivers, Wake Forest. Morin is still there, right? So he's probably the slot guy.
Right.
There's so much value, though, at where he's being taken. He's going 15 rounds after Jamal Banks. And I don't think it's nearly as clear-cut as the ADP would tell you. I can certainly get on board with this because I don't think the offense is changing. The offense is going to be basically the exact same. And when we saw him against VMI, not Vanderbilt, I was
okay.
Right letter, wrong school and conference and league. But I thought he looked good when we saw him. I can get on board with this. And I haven't drafted him at all, and I think I might now that we're talking about it.
I like Jamal Banks, and I am still advocating for him to be the wide receiver one. I do think Jamal Banks will be the wide receiver one, but I don't think we're going to see as heavy of a target share as what we saw with A.T. Perry, where he was getting 12 to 15 targets a game. I think Donovan Green and Jamal Banks can both exist and both be pretty fantasy relevant. I would say the two concerns I have for Green: one, his injury track record, and two, I like Wesley Grimes. And I think there's been some reports that Wesley Grimes has been really, really impressive early on this spring. And I think he's a really talented guy that also plays that outside receiver position. So, but if Donovan Green can hold him off and lock up that starting gig, I think it's it could pay off for owners that draft him late in drafts.
I mean, he's going to be their primary downfield option, like you said.
I think so.
So,
too. Yeah.
I mean, I'm way more, again, format matters so much when we're talking about some of these players, but a guy whose average reception was 17 yards last year in a best ball, where he's going to be the primary outside wide receiver, that tells me that this is someone that I probably need to draft, even if it's at the end of drafts. Even if I think Wesley Grimes can come in and take some of the workload. I mean, you're going to get explosive downfield passes that help you win weeks, regardless, just because of the role that he plays. Just health is probably the biggest concern.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, well, that will pretty much wrap up our bounce back candidates for the day. I want to thank everybody for listening in. I want to thank Chris Moxley here for joining me here today and our little what we were able to do to squeeze out a CTN episode, even with Jared being gone. So thank you, Chris. And as Jared would put it, I want y'all to have a wonderful and blessed day. Take it easy, y'all.
Nailed it.